I called my husband 30 times to tell him that his mother was fighting for her life, but he refused to answer while enjoying a tropical getaway with his mistress. I held her hand as she passed, handled the funeral by myself, and then left my wedding ring beside the signed divorce papers before disappearing from his life forever. The 30th call connected at 1:50 in the morning. I know the exact time because I was standing under the only working light in the ICU hallway of St. Alden's Medical Center, watching the call timer count up on my screen, and because that number is carved somewhere in me now, in a place no surgeon could reach, a woman answered, sleepy, warm, laughing at something I couldn't hear. Babe, your phone won't shut up. And then my husband's voice, closer to her than he had been to me in a year. Just silence it. Click. I stood in that hallway with the phone still against my ear, listening to nothing, and I forgot how to breathe. Behind the glass door of room 4, machines were keeping time for the woman who had been more of a mother to me than anyone I'd ever had. Her only son was somewhere with a phone he'd just silenced, and a woman who called him babe. 50 minutes later, Ruth squeezed my hand once and let go. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up 8 hours to the soup. My name is Claire. I've been an insurance claims adjuster for 12 years, the last 7 at a regional carrier, working large loss property files. My entire job is reading what people put on paper and finding the exact sentence where the story stops matching the receipts. I have read 1,000 versions of, and then it just caught fire on its own. I can smell a rewritten timeline from across a desk. I want you to remember that about me. It matters later. Derek and I had been married 9 years. He was a territory sales manager for Corvant Medical, surgical implants, big hospitals, bigger dinners. He was the kind of man who remembered your kid's name at a barbecue and forgot your birthday in the same week, and somehow you always came away feeling like the forgetting was your fault. Charming is a skill. I understand that now. Back then I called it a personality. His mother, Ruth, was 71, widowed since her Jean passed in 2019. She lived 15 minutes from us in the little white house on Linden Street where Derek grew up, and every Tuesday for the last 6 years, I went over after work and we made dinner together. Not because Derek asked me to check on her. He never once asked. I went because the first time I met Ruth, she looked at me across her kitchen table and said, well, finally, someone in this family who listens. On my wedding day, she took both my hands and asked me to call her mom. She meant it. She taught me her pie crust, cold butter, colder hands, don't apologize to the dough. She defended me at every holiday table when Derek's sister, Dana, made her little comments about my job, my clothes, my little hobbies. Ruth would set down her fork and say, Dana, honey, the kitchen's that way if you need something to do with your mouth. Ruth was the reason I stayed as long as I did. I can admit that now. There were signs that last year. His phone went face down in February and never turned back over. He joined a gym across town from his office. He started smelling like hotel soap on days he hadn't traveled. I'm a claims adjuster. I catalog discrepancies for a living, and I cataloged every one of these and then filed them under a category I'd invented just for my own marriage. Probably nothing. The Monday before it happened, I dropped him at the airport for a work conference in Denver. Big client. Career defining, he said. At the curb, he kissed my cheek like a coworker and said, don't blow up my phone this week. Emergencies only. I remember laughing a little. What counts as an emergency? You'll know, he said, and rolled his suitcase through the doors without looking back. He was right about one thing. I knew. Tuesday, 6:14 p.m. I know the time because Ruth's kitchen clock was one of those loud analog ones shaped like a rooster, and I had just checked it to see if the broth had simmered long enough. We were making her vegetable soup, the one she'd been promising to teach me properly for years, the one with the tomatoes she grew along the back fence. She was mid-sentence about those tomatoes, something about how Jean used to steal them off the vine like a raccoon in a cardigan. Then the wooden spoon hit the floor. I turned around and Ruth was holding the edge of the counter with both hands, and her face was wrong, not pale, wrong, like someone had reached inside and switched something off. Claire, she said, my head, and then her hands weren't holding the counter anymore. I got to her before the floor did. I will always be grateful for that one thing, that she went down into my arms and not onto her own tile. I called 911 with one hand and held her head in my lap with the other, and the rooster clock kept ticking like nothing was happening, and the soup kept simmering, and somewhere between my address and her birth date my voice stopped shaking because a very cold, very old part of my brain took over. The part that works catastrophes for a living. The paramedics were there in 9 minutes. I rode in the ambulance backward, holding her hand, watching a stranger's gloved fingers do things to her arm, saying, you're okay, Mom, I'm here, you're okay, which was one lie and one truth. At St. Alden's, they took her through doors I wasn't allowed past. A triage nurse pointed me at a waiting room the color of oatmeal, and I called Derek. Call 1, 6:58 p.m., 4 rings, voicemail. His cheerful recorded voice, you've reached Derek Hensley, leave it short. Call 2, call 3, call 5, voicemail, voicemail, voicemail. I texted in all caps, your mom collapsed. We are at St. Alden's. She is in the ICU. Call me now. Delivered. Nothing. I told myself it was the conference. Ballrooms are loud. Phones go in pockets. I told myself the thing I'd been telling myself all year, in the voice I use on nervous clients. There's an ordinary explanation. There almost always is. Around 8, a doctor came out. Dr. Amanda Chen, neurointensivist. I would learn later she'd spent 15 years delivering the worst sentences of people's lives, and it showed in the way she delivered them. Slow, level, no adjectives you didn't need. Ruth has a ruptured aneurysm, she said. There's been a hemorrhage around her brain. We have her stabilized and she's breathing on her own, which is genuinely good. But I have to be honest with you. At her age, with the location of the rupture, surgery isn't a safe option. The biggest danger now is a second rupture. The next 24 hours matter a great deal. Her son is traveling, I said. He's on his way. Back then, I still believed the shape of that sentence, even if I couldn't get anyone to confirm the contents. The charge nurse, Pat Delgado, 20 years on that unit, 4 arms like a woman who has moved a lot of people who couldn't move themselves, walked me back to room 4 and pulled up Ruth's chart to verify contacts. It says here Ruth designated you as her healthcare surrogate, Pat said. 2 years ago, you're her decision maker. Me, you, Claire Hensley. It's notarized. And I remembered. 2 summers ago, Ruth sliding a manila envelope across this same kitchen table. For your files, honey. If anything ever happens, I want you deciding, not the children. You'll actually listen. I'd laughed and told her nothing was going to happen. She'd patted my hand like I was very young. Ruth had done her paperwork. Remember that about her too. It matters later. Call 8. Call 10. I texted Dana at 9:40. Your mom is in the ICU at St. Alden's. Aneurysm. It's serious. I can't reach Derek. Dana called back 4 minutes later, and for 1 second my heart lifted, because I thought, finally, family. Is she dying? Dana said. Or is this one of your things? Dana, she's in the ICU. A sigh. The specific sigh of a woman being inconvenienced. Derek works hard, Claire. He's at the biggest conference of his year. Stop nagging him. God, you're dramatic. Dramatic. From an ICU waiting room, holding a plastic bag with Ruth's shoes in it. Are you coming? I asked. I'll come in the morning if it's still serious, she said, and hung up. If it's still serious. I stood there and looked at those shoes. The beige ones with the memory foam, Ruth called her cloud shoes, and I put Dana in a file too, a newer file, one I hadn't invented a comforting name for yet. Call 12, call 15. Around midnight, Ruth woke up. Her eyes found me before anything else in the room, and her voice was paper thin, but it was hers. There you are. Here I am, Mom. She looked at the door. Where's my Derek? I want to tell you I hesitated. I didn't. 9 years of practice. His flight got delayed, Mom. Weather. He's coming. She watched me for a moment with those sharp eyes that never missed a thing at a holiday table, and then she squeezed my fingers and said, "You're here." That's the same thing. It wasn't. We both knew it wasn't. But she was 71, and her head was full of the worst kind of weather, and she'd decided, the way she decided everything, that she was going to be kind about it. She drifted off. I went back to the hallway. Call 19, call 22, call 26. Somewhere in there, I stopped expecting an answer and started leaving evidence. That's the only way I can describe the shift. My voice on those voicemails got flatter and clearer with everyone, like I was dictating a claim file. It's 12:51 a.m. Your mother is in the ICU at St. Alden's. She woke up and asked for you. Please call back. Call 28. She's asking for you. Please, just call back. Call 30 connected at 1:50 a.m. You already know what answered. The giggle. Babe, your phone won't shut up. His voice, low and easy and 2 inches from her. Just silence it. The click, the hallway, the light overhead buzzing like it was embarrassed for me. Here's what I did next, and I need you to understand it, because it's the moment I stopped being one kind of woman and started being another. I didn't call back. I didn't text something scorching. I opened my phone, screenshotted the call log, all 30 outgoing calls, time-stamped from 6:58 p.m. to 1:50 a.m., and emailed it to myself. Then I put the phone in my pocket and went back into room 4, because the person in that bed had never once silenced me, and she was the only Hensley I owed anything. Pat Delgado brought me a cup of water I hadn't asked for. Is your husband close? She asked. No, I said. First, fully true thing I'd said all night. At 2:12 a.m., the monitors changed their minds. Alarms are quieter in real life than on television. It's mostly doors opening fast and people speaking in short sentences. Dr. Chen appeared at the foot of the bed within minutes, looked at the screens, looked at the new scan, and then looked at me, and I knew before she opened her mouth because 15 years of this had taught her face to say it first. There's been a second rupture, she said. It's extensive. Claire, you're her surrogate, and her advance directive is very clear. No machines, no heroics. She wrote it herself. All we can do now is make absolutely sure she isn't in any pain. Do you understand what I'm telling you? She decided already, I said. You're asking me to honor it. Yes, then honor it. They dimmed the lights. Pat unhooked the things that beeped and left the things that helped. I pulled the chair to the left side of the bed because Ruth was left-handed and I wanted her good hand. At 2:40 a.m., Ruth squeezed my fingers once. I will swear to that in any court in this country. Once, deliberate, like a period at the end of a sentence, and let go. The room went quiet in a way rooms don't come back from. I was the only person in it. 30 calls. Her only son never answered one. I sat with her for a while. I told her the soup was going to be fine. I told her I'd take the tomatoes in before the frost. Pat came in eventually with forms, because death is mostly forms, and I signed where the tabs pointed and my hand didn't shake, and some part of me stood off to the side watching that steady hand and thought, I drove home at 4 a.m. to a dark house and did not sleep. At 9:58 the next morning, my phone buzzed. Derek. Not a call. A text. Sorry, insane week. What's up? I sat at our kitchen table and read those 5 words maybe 40 times. What's up? I thought about the last 12 hours. I thought about the rooster clock and the cloud shoes in room 4 going quiet. I typed 3 words. Your mother died. The little dots appeared, disappeared, appeared. His reply took an hour and 4 minutes. That's awful. I'm stuck here. Flights are a mess. Can you handle the arrangement? arrangements? You're better at that stuff. That stuff. Her body, her service, her 71 years, reduced to a category of errand assigned to the staff. I looked at that text the way I look at a suspicious claim. Not with rage, with attention. Flights are a mess. From Denver. In June. Interesting. Noted. Filed. I texted back one word. Okay. And I meant it in a way he would not understand for 6 more days. I handled it. Alone. Wednesday morning, I sat across from Alan Pruitt, the soft-spoken director at the funeral home Ruth had already chosen for herself years ago. Because of course she had. Her file there was neat as a hymnal. I picked the casket, the middle one, warm wood, nothing gaudy, because Ruth thought gaudy was a character flaw. Pruitt kept saying, you and your husband. You and your husband can review the program proofs. You and your husband will ride in the family car. The third time, I stopped correcting him. Let the paperwork say what it wanted. Paper and I were about to have a very productive week. I chose white roses because Ruth loved them and grew everything except them. She said roses were too much drama for a backyard and then bought herself a dozen every birthday. I wrote her eulogy at her kitchen table at 3 in the morning, next to the pot of soup we never finished. I couldn't bring myself to pour it out. I just put the lid on it and wrote about pie crust and cold hands and a woman who did her paperwork. And here's the thing nobody tells you about planning a funeral. You get very calm, very organized, very thorough. Grief hollows some people out. It turned me into a filing system. Wednesday afternoon, I called the florist to pay for the roses, and before I read out the card number, I logged into our joint Visa account to check the balance. Reflex. 12 years of reconciling numbers. Denver. The statement loaded, and I stopped breathing for the second time that week. Line 11, Azure Palms Resort and Spa, Collins Ave, Miami Beach, FL, 2,448, 0 hours. 4 nights. Ocean Frontier. I know it was Ocean Frontier because I looked up the rate card. $612 a night. Line 12, Azure Palms In-Room Dining, $187.60. Line 14, another $203.11. Line 15, $166.45. Room service for 2, 4 nights straight. Nobody orders the seafood tower for 1. Line 19, Azure Palms Spa, couples signature ritual, 80 min, 340 Vergarn. Couples. It was right there in the merchant description. The man couldn't even commit adultery without itemizing it. And then line 22, in-room sommelier, Veuve Clicquot La Grande Dame, $212 champagne. The exact brand I asked for on our 5th anniversary when he swirled his water glass and told me champagne was a waste. It's just wine with a marketing budget. Apparently, it's only a waste on me. I sat in Ruth's kitchen with the phone in one hand and the florist on hold in the other, and I want to be honest with you about what I felt, because everyone assumes it was rage. It wasn't. It was recognition. It was the feeling I get 40 pages into a fraudulent claim when the story and the receipts finally split in front of me, and I can see all the way down. I didn't scream. I didn't text him a single word about it. I paid the florist. Then I went to Ruth's little study, woke up Jean's ancient laser printer, and printed every page of that statement, twice. I highlighted nothing yet. In my line of work, you never mark up the original. Thursday morning, while I was picking up the memorial programs, Ruth's smiling face, sky blue border, Ruth Ellen Hensley, beloved mother, my phone rang. A number from Corvent Medical. For one wild second, I thought it was him, calling from a work line, and I hated the hope that jumped in my chest. It was Monica, the regional admin. Claire, I am so sorry about Derek's mom. The whole office is heartbroken. I wanted to ask where we should send flowers, and honestly, of all the weeks, on his vacation too. That's just cruel timing. The parking lot went very still. His vacation, I said. His PTO, he put in for the week. Gosh, 3 weeks ago, maybe more. Anyway, is the service Saturday? Should flowers go to the church or the church is fine, I heard myself say, and I gave her the address in a voice so pleasant it frightened me. 3 weeks. There was no conference. There was never a conference. There was a request form, submitted in advance, approved by a manager, planned around a resort's rate calendar. In my job, we have a term for evidence that a loss was arranged before it occurred. We call it prior intent. Juries call it worse things. He hadn't just failed to answer 30 calls. He had built, weeks ahead, a world in which the calls could be silenced. I stood in that parking lot holding 200 programs with his mother's face on them, and I felt my hands go cold and then steady, and I made a different kind of appointment. Marianne Okafor had been practicing family law for 22 years, and her office told you everything. A box of tissues on the near corner of the desk, and behind her, a shredder the size of a dishwasher. Comfort and consequences, both within arm's reach. Thursday, 2 p.m., 2 days after Ruth died, 2 days before we buried her. I put the printed statement on her desk, along with the screenshot of the call log, and I told her all of it in 11 minutes, in order, with timestamps, because that is the only way I know how to tell things. Okafor listened without moving. When I finished, she tapped the call log once with one finger. 30 calls, she said. 6:58 p.m. to 1:50 a.m. And he was where again? An oceanfront room he booked 3 weeks ago. She nodded slowly, the way you nod at a load-bearing fact. Okay, first rule, and I need you to hear it. Do not confront him. Not a word, not a hint, not one raised eyebrow. Angry people warn people. Organized people win. I'm very organized, I said. I can see that, she said, glancing at my tabbed folder, and for the first time in 4 days, one corner of my mouth moved. She explained what filing would set in motion. The petition for dissolution of marriage, and the automatic orders that snap into place the moment it's filed, freezing both parties properties from draining accounts or shredding records. She used the phrase that became my new favorite phrase in the English language: dissipation of marital assets. Money he spent on the affair is money he spent out of your pocket, she said. The resort, the spa, the champagne, we trace every dollar and it comes off his side of the ledger. Courts do not love a man who funds his girlfriend's vacation on the joint card while his wife plans his mother's funeral. Judges are human. Bring me everything. Define everything. 3 years of statements, tax returns, the mortgage, titles, phone records, and Claire, preserve those voicemails. Everyone. Back them up twice. That afternoon, I signed the papers to bury my mother-in-law, the final authorization at Pruitt's office, my signature under responsible party. Then I drove back across town and signed the other papers. The petition. My name, printed and signed, on the line above a blank line waiting for his. My hand never shook once. I checked. Adjuster's check. That night, I went through 3 years of our financial life at Ruth's kitchen table with a highlighter and the lid still on the soup pot. And this is where I have to tell you that Miami was not the beginning. It was just the first time he'd been sloppy enough to use the joint card for the headline. There were transfers, starting 7 months back, $400 here, $650 there, $800 in April, always to the same external account ending in 4417, always labeled with the world's laziest lie, Miss C. 7 months, $4,300. There was a charge at Delacroix Jewelers in March, $1,850. I own no new jewelry. I checked my own jewelry box like an idiot, standing there at midnight, actually checking, and then I sat down on the closet floor for a minute because my knees had opinions. There was a second phone line added to our family plan in February, $46.20 a month, a number I had never once seen. Each one I remember trying the old reflex. Miss could be golf. The jewelry could be a surprise. The rationalizations came out of habit, like a phantom limb, and each one died on contact with the paper. That's the thing about receipts. They don't gaslight. They just sit there being true. By 1 a.m., I had a banker's box, tabbed and indexed, banking, card statements, transfers, 4417, phone, Miami, call log. I looked at that last tab for a long time. Friday morning, I carried the box into Okafor's office. She flipped through it, tab by tab, and then looked up at me over her glasses. 22 years, she said. I have never had a client walk in with a cleaner file. What did you say you do? I read paper for a living. He really picked the wrong wife, she said, and slid the box to her paralegal. The phone rang again Friday at 9:20 a.m. while I was steaming the wrinkles out of a black dress. An older man's voice, careful and kind. Mrs. Hensley? Claire? This is Harold Brenner. I was Ruth's attorney for 31 years. I saw the notice in the paper. I am so very sorry. I know the service is tomorrow, and I do not want to intrude on that, but I didn't feel right letting you walk into this weekend without knowing you have someone in your corner. Could you come by this morning? It's about Ruth's estate, and it shouldn't wait. Brenner's office smelled like old books and lemon polish. Ruth's file on his desk was as thick as a phone book, because of course it was. Ruth updated her will on March 14th of this year, he said. She replaced the one from 2016 entirely. She was very clear-minded about it, and he slid a single page across the desk. Very thorough. That's a capacity affidavit from her physician, Dr. Feldman, signed the same week at her request. She said, and I'm quoting your mother-in-law directly, I don't want anyone claiming I'd lost my marbles. Count the marbles, Howard, and put it in writing. I laughed. In an estate lawyer's office, 2 days after she died, I laughed because that was her. That was exactly her, out-papering everyone in the room from beyond it. The house on Linden Street, Brenner said. The residence and its contents. She left to you. Her words in the document are, to my daughter-in-law, Claire, who has been my daughter in every way that can't be notarized. The lemon polish office got very blurry. Derek receives $25,000 and his father's watch. Dana receives $25,000 and Ruth's Cedar Hope chest. And Claire, the will contains what's called an in terrorem clause, a no contest clause. Anyone who challenges the will forfeits their share entirely. Ruth insisted on it. She initialed that paragraph separately. Why? I asked. Why March? What happened in March? Brenner looked at me for a moment and then opened the file and took out a sealed envelope with my name on it in Ruth's slanted cursive. She left instructions, he said gently. She told me, if it ever comes to this, give it to Claire when she's not driving. I opened it right there because I could not have waited 9 seconds, let alone the ride home. Claire, I saw them in October. The farmer's market out on Route 9, the one with the good peaches. He had his hand on her back the way he used to have it on yours. He didn't see me. He never sees anyone. I didn't tell you. I'm sorry for that, and I'm not. You'd have stayed longer, just to soften it for me. I know how you are. You'd have carried him and me both, and I wasn't going to let you. So I did paperwork instead. It's what I had. Don't stay for anyone now, sweetheart. Not even for me. Especially not for me. The house likes your soup better anyway. Mom, I sat in Brenner's parking lot afterward with my hands at 10 and 2 and the engine off, and I cried for 17 minutes. I know because I timed it, because apparently that's who I am now. And it wasn't about Derek. Not 1 minute of it was about Derek. She knew. For 8 months she knew, and she never let it touch a single Tuesday. She just quietly rearranged the world so that when the floor gave out under me, there would be a house standing there, hers. Where's my Derek? She'd asked, at midnight, with her head full of storms. She knew exactly what he was, and she still asked for him. That's Mother's. That was her one soft spot, and he spent his whole life standing on on it. I drove home. I finished steaming the black dress. And I understood finally and completely that Saturday I would bury the only real family I had, and that everything after Saturday was already written, most of it in Ruth's handwriting. He texted Friday night, finally found a flight, land Sunday 8:40 p.m. This week destroyed me. Sunday 8:40 p.m. I looked at those words and did the math I do best. I had roughly 44 hours, one funeral, and one performance of a lifetime to get through. The performance where I say nothing at all. Saturday morning, the church was full. Ruth's whole world showed up. The garden club, the church ladies, the pharmacist who'd known her 40 years, half the farmer's market. Lorraine Petty, her oldest friend, had organized a reception without being asked, because that generation of women runs logistics the way generals wish they could. The front pew held the family, me, a space where Dana should already have been, and one empty seat with a program resting on it, and I promise you, every single person in that church saw it. You could feel them seeing it. An empty seat at a funeral is the loudest thing in any room. Dana swept in 11 minutes late in sunglasses, crying at a volume calibrated for the back row. She gripped strangers' hands down the aisle like a candidate. Derek is destroyed, she announced to anyone in reach. Just destroyed. He's trapped out of state. The airlines, you know how it is. He would give anything to be here. Anything. He'd given $612 a night to be somewhere else. I gave the eulogy. I talked about pie crust and cold hands. I said, Ruth did her paperwork, and every person who'd ever been loved by her laughed and cried at the same time, because they knew. I did not mention her son. The omission stood at the front of that church like a second casket, and I let it. At the cemetery, while the pastor spoke, my phone buzzed against my hip. I glanced down. Derek, tell everyone I'm heartbroken. Tell everyone. His mother's burial, outsourced, like the arrangements, like the marriage, like everything he'd ever gotten to skip because a woman would handle it. I put the phone away. I stepped forward and laid Ruth's white roses on the warm wood, and I leaned in close where only she could hear, and I told her the truth instead. I'll take care of it, Mom. All of it. Afterward, at the reception, Lorraine Petty took both my hands in her small, strong ones, exactly the way Ruth used to. You were the daughter she prayed for, she said. I hope you know that. She told me so, in those words. I know, I said. That's why I'm going to do what comes next. Lorraine looked at me for a long, sharp moment. Those women miss nothing. And then she squeezed my hands once, deliberate, like a period at the end of a sentence, and said, Good. Sunday morning, 9:07, the doorbell rang. Donna, no sunglasses now, arms crossed on my porch. I need Mom's ring, she said. No hello. The sapphire. Derek says it should stay in the family, so I'm going to hold on to it until he's home. Everything of Ruth stays where it is, I said. Her attorney's instructions. Nothing leaves the house until the estate's handled. Her attorney. Dana's laugh was a small, ugly thing. You've got to be kidding. You're not even blood, Claire. You're being dramatic again. This family is grieving and you're playing paperwork. Where was Derek, Dana? It came out quiet. That's the thing I've learned about my own anger. It doesn't get louder. It gets quieter and it gets specific. She blinked. He was the conference. Where was he? And her face did it. The flicker. I've deposed enough claimants to know the exact half second when a story dies behind someone's eyes. He needed a break, okay? She snapped. Marriages have rough patches, Claire. Grow up. It's not my business what you knew. Silence on my porch. A lawnmower somewhere down the street. You knew where he was, I said, while I was calling you from an ICU waiting room, and you called me dramatic. It wasn't my place to. I closed the door. Gently. I want that on the record. Gently. A slam is a message. A soft click is a verdict. Then I stood in my front hall and shook for a while, because the body keeps its own books. And when I was done shaking, I looked at the clock. 9:31 a.m., landing at 8:40 p.m., 11 hours. I'll be honest with you about that last afternoon, because the internet loves to imagine that revenge feels cinematic. There were two versions of Sunday in my head. In one, I'm at the airport at 8:40 with the statement printed poster-sized, screaming down the arrivals hall while strangers film it. 9 years of it, out loud, in public, at volume. I even ironed his black funeral suit. I want you to understand that. Muscle memory walked me to the closet and put the iron in my hand before my brain caught up. 9 years of handling that stuff. And I stood there pressing the collar of a suit for a funeral he skipped. And then I set the iron down very carefully and hung the suit in the hall closet and said, out loud, to no one, for whoever he becomes next. Then I chose the other version of Sunday, the quiet one. The one where paper does all the talking, because paper is the only language he's ever going to fully receive. I cleaned my house one last time, top to bottom. I don't fully know why. Maybe so no one could ever say I left a mess. I've only ever left one mess in my life, and he was landing at 8:40. At 3:12 p.m., I set the kitchen table. Ruth's funeral program went in the middle, exactly where he always drops his keys. Her smiling face, sky blue border, the first thing his hand would touch. Beside it, the Miami statement. One line highlighted in yellow. Not the resort, not the couple's ritual, the champagne. 212's La Grande Dame, in-room. He'd know why. Somewhere under the tan, he'd know exactly why. Beside that, the divorce papers. My signature already dry, 4 days dry, older than his mother's grave. Then I slid off my wedding ring. It fought me a little at the knuckle, 9 years of swelling into place, and I set it down on the petition on the empty line, the one waiting for his name. I picked up my suitcase. I turned off my phone, and I disappeared from his life the way he disappeared from mine, without a word, and much, much much better organized. He came home that night to an empty house. I came home to one he didn't even know was mine. Here's the part you're actually here for, the accounting. Monday, 9:15 a.m. A process server named Gary Whitlock, 11 years in the trade, faced like a friendly mailman, which Okafor says is the whole trick, walked into the lobby of Horvant Medical's regional office and served Derek Hensley with a petition for dissolution of marriage in front of the reception desk, 2 sales reps, and his district manager. Okafor timed it for the lobby. People behave in lobbies, she told me, and they remember them. I turned my phone back on Tuesday. 47 missed calls from Derek across 3 days. I know the exact number because I logged them. It's a habit now. 63 texts. And you could chart the man's entire psychology on a whiteboard. Call me to "this is insane" to "baby please." It wasn't what it sounds like to "you're really doing this over one mistake" to my personal favorite, the one I'd frame if framing weren't gaudy, and Ruth thought gaudy was a character flaw. You could have told me how serious it was. 30 voicemails, Derek. I could have told you 30 times. I answered none of it. Okafor did the talking, on letterhead. The financial part ended the way paper always ends it. Trace to fair spending, the Miami trip at $4,157, 7 months of transfers to the account ending 44/17 at $4,300, the Delacroix charge at $118.50, 13 months of the mystery phone line, total documented dissipation, $10,929. Every dollar came off his side of the ledger, plus he ate $4,000 of my attorney's fees, because the mediator, a retired judge named Eleanor Voss, who ran her conference room like a courtroom she missed, read the file and suggested, in the tone judges use when they're not really suggesting, that Mr. Hensley take the deal in front of him. He tried one thing first, though. Of course he did. 3 weeks in, Okafor forwarded me a letter from his lawyer announcing his intent to contest his mother's will. Undue influence, they claimed, by me. Harold Brenner's reply was 2 pages long, and I've read it more times than any novel I own. It attached the in terrorem clause, Ruth's separately initialed paragraph, and Dr. Feldman's capacity affidavit, count the marbles, Howard, and closed by noting that his client was welcome to convert his $25,000 inheritance into $0 at his earliest convenience. The contest died in 9 days. Derek took the money and Jean's watch. 6 weeks later, that watch showed up in an online estate sale listing, $600, or best offer. He sold his father's watch. That told me everything the affair hadn't. The mediation itself lasted 1 session. Derek looked smaller across that table than I'd ever seen him. Tanner, but smaller. And he waited until the very end, until the papers were squared, to look directly at me for the first time and say, "You could have warned me, Claire, about Mom. You could have tried harder." The room went still. Judge Voss's eyebrows achieved orbit. I didn't raise my voice. I've told you. It only gets quieter. I called you 30 times, I said. Okafor slid a single page across the table. Exhibit C. The call log, 30 outgoing calls, 6:58 p.m. to 1:50 a.m., time-stamped. The last one 50 minutes before his mother let go of my hand. He looked at it for a long time. He didn't ask anything else, that day or ever. And the rest of the ledger settled itself the way small towns settle things. The woman from the phone, her name was Brittany, she found me through the online obituary, because of course the comments section knows everything, sent me one message. I didn't know he was married. He told me his mom passed after we got home. Then I saw the service was Saturday and he was posting from the beach Thursday. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. They lasted 11 more days. Turns out watching a man silence his dying mother's calls is a red flag even at the source. Dana learned what an empty pew costs in a town where Ruth Hensley spent 71 years being loved. The Garden Club remembers. The church ladies remember. Lorraine Petty, who runs the casserole network like air traffic control, remembers loudest of all. Nobody was cruel to Dana. They were simply, permanently, politely finished with her, which in that world is the harsher sentence. Nobody went to jail. Nobody got destroyed on the news. That's not what this was. He just had to go live inside the truth, in a town that knew it, with a settlement that itemized it. For a man like Derek, who ran his whole life on being handled and believed, that's not a punishment. That's an invoice. It's been 4 months. I live on Linden Street now, in the little white house with the tomatoes along the back fence. I took them in before the frost, like I promised. The rooster clock still ticks too loud, and I have never once considered fixing it. The divorce finalizes in March. Okafor says it's the cleanest file she's closed in years. Brenner checks on me like an uncle. Lorraine brings casseroles I don't need and information I absolutely do. Last Tuesday, I made the soup, start to finish, alone. Her recipe card propped against the rooster clock in that slanted cursive. Don't apologize to the dough. Don't rush the broth. It came out right, first try. I sat in her chair at her table in my house, and I ate 2 bowls, and I said, "We did our paperwork, Mom," to an empty kitchen that didn't feel empty at all. And sometimes late at night, a number I don't recognize calls my phone. New area codes. He rotates them. It rings, and I look at it, and I set the phone down face down, his old trick, and let it ring itself out. Every single time I let it ring. He's the one who taught me how.